Welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This time I'm talking to Laurie Grace Bailey about her amazing photography journey. Laurie is a storm chaser and Astro photographer based in Tucson, Arizona. Her work conveys the majesty and power of the monsoon, dust storms and Bortle 1 skies around her home. Her passion for natural spaces and unique weather events has led to some interesting experiences which she shares with us as she evocatively portrays the desert and mountain landscapes that she explores. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Laurie, welcome to the podcast. How are you going?
Doing great, Grant. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I've been having quite a interesting day. It's been a lot of fun. So I guess thank you very much for taking the time out and coming on the podcast. You know, I'm really pleased to have you. We were talking in a Twitter space. I think it was a few weeks ago when you were describing one of your experiences, and it was hearing that really sort of made me want to hear your wider story and hear more about what you do and why you do it. But I guess let's start off with how you got started in doing what you do, or do you want to start with telling us what it is that you do?
Sure. So I started off in 2015. I've always loved photography, and a lot of people have inspiration, right? They often are inspired to start photography from a friend or a family member. They're given a camera when they're young or something. I didn't. I got started. My love for photography happened when my kids were born. And like any parent, you start taking photos and more photos and more photos. And then you realize that, especially at the time in the early 2000s, late 90s, those cameras weren't the greatest. So a friend encouraged me to just pick up one of the Canon, I think it's still the Canon XT, was one of the original digital rebels, basically. And I picked one of those up with a kit lens, and I just started shooting and filling up those cards, editing in those really cruddy apps, those free programs online that you could edit. And I didn't care because I loved taking photos of my kids. And then I started pointing the camera at the flowers and the dogs and then the skies, and then it just starts growing, and you just you become it becomes an addiction. You just want to continue to shoot more and more. And of course, even then I started thinking, oh, look at me, these are great pictures, and it's just a simple photo of my kid with a beautiful sunset in the background, and those are priceless. So that really started. That really started my passion.
The memories that you can't, that you capture with your children and everything. I've got a whole stack of original, the analog photo albums,
right?
Which go from when was it, 92 when we had our first child through until about 98. It's funny, the first one gets. I think she's got about 3 albums on her own. The second one has only got 2, and the third one's only got 1.
I think that's the standard. It kind of drops off a little bit, and then you kind of feel guilty. Like, was there a certain minimum I was supposed to meet with the second and third kids? We only have 2 in our family, but I did the same thing. I actually had a hard drive failure. And so I literally lost all of my kids' photos from 2003 to 2008. And I did back up. I'm very careful about having backups. And I had one hard drive that failed. That was the main hard drive. And I thought, well, I'm not going to worry about it. And when I went to get the backup of all of those images, that hard drive also had a catastrophic failure in the same week. And it was just, I knew that I could have sent it in and done this and that. I did have a lot of photos. It wasn't the full collection, but I did have several others through email or whatever. But I took all of the photos that I had ever taken of my kids, and I printed them just like you said. And I had them printed and I put them in photo books, and they're in the entertainment center, just several stacks of photo books, because I don't ever want to lose them again. Digital is great, but if you don't have prints and something happens with
it's the ultimate backup. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. So yeah, that was how I got started. That's what gave me a love for photography. And then in 2015, I started shooting weddings and portraits and things like that. So I jumped, straight into the shooting people thing, and I loved that. Then of course I realized I got inspired by seeing other people shooting these beautiful storms out here in Arizona and in the Southwest, gorgeous sunsets. And I realized that I could use that same really expensive gear to point that at the sky as well.
Yeah.
And that's how things really took off from there. So I do a little bit of both. I love shooting humans. What is that saying? I shoot humans for a fee, but I shoot landscapes for free, or for
That's
me,
right. For me, yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what is it about? I guess the skies, you mentioned the sunsets there in Arizona, but also the storms. What is it that makes you want to go out in conditions that most people would want to hide from and stay inside?
Yeah, in the United States, the National Weather Service actually has a motto that for storms, which is when the thunder roars, go indoors. And storm chasers have appended that, or have shortened that, I should say, to just say simply, when thunder roars, go, instead of go indoors, because we want to get out there. But once you start doing it and learning the ropes, so to speak, whether you're going through a monsoon workshop or just learning tutorials and doing everything you can to learn about it, you learn to mitigate risk, right? You're a photographer. You've been out in the wild. You learn to mitigate risk. You don't want to get bit by that rattlesnake or whatever those ghastly spiders you were telling me about this morning. And you want to come home and learn to do it all over again. So it seems extreme, and for the normal person who hasn't ever done it before, it really can be frightening. But you learn to mitigate the risks and play smart and safe as much as possible. Of course, there's always an element of danger, but yeah, I just want to get out there and get it and capture something extraordinary. I really do. It's so fun to come home with that one shot. Even if it doesn't gain a lot of traction on social media, like people don't like it, if it's special to you, it's extremely rewarding. And that's my fuel.
Absolutely. And I got to say, some of your images are absolutely incredible, and it's not just sort of the classic lightning or shelf clouds either. There's some of your sunset images and some of your, sort of more, I guess, your classic landscapes are really good too, so, kudos to you for getting out there and showing the world what this stuff looks like.
Well, thank you.
Are you doing photography now full time, or are you still working part time or working and
Yeah. So COVID really messed up a lot of that fun for photographers. So I'm getting back into it slowly. I've had, of course, more opportunity to get out, and while everything kind of stabilizes and the economy stabilizes, hoping to continue to put food on the table is always a big thing. But even then, if I'm not out shooting, if I'm stuck at home not doing anything, it's not helping me. And so I decide to get out. There are days where I know I'm not going to capture something extraordinary, but I'll grab my gear and take my dogs, and we will venture out into the great wide open. We'll just get lost somewhere along a hillside, and I'll just turn the camera on for a time lapse, which is surprising. You never know what you're going to get, right? When you go out not expecting much. It's days like that where you're suddenly gifted with something where you're like, what is going on here? I've got this caribou in front of me and the sun's going down. Just something spectacular can often happen just because you decided to just get off your lazy butt and get out of the house.
Yeah, so some of my favourite shots are those where it's either conditions or something just aligns, and you happen to be there, and you manage to capture that moment. And I think it's the story behind that you've remembered and that you take with you that I really think enhances the value of those sorts of moments and those sorts of shots, because you can always look back and remember and go, yeah, I stood there, I saw that, and that was a really magic experience.
It's such a cathartic moment when you're out there and in the wide open. And I like to take my two dogs with me. I have a Norwegian Elk Hound and a German Shepherd. They're big dogs, and so they stink the car up, especially during the monsoon when they get out there in the wet mud and then they climb back on in. And I endure the smell just because they're my buddies.
Yeah.
It's like having your best friends out there and watching them frolic in the open fields and just having the time of their lives is. And then me being able to create something by shooting the skies or a sunset or something that's just simple and plain is even okay for me sometimes, because then I come home and of course it's not going to solve your problems, but it sure eases the pain and it sure eases the burden that we all carry when we're stuck inside the house worrying about bills and our future and our kids and all of the things that every one of us worry about. And it's really important for me to just get out there, and it's a form of healing. Wouldn't you agree? There's a sense of healing that comes from it.
It's how I clear my head from the daily stress. I mean I've got a fairly intense job in IT full time, and sometimes I don't get the time that I'd really like to spend, and there's a lot of times where I look out the window, going, I could be out there, but now I'm stuck in here, watching a really cool sunset, and I know I've got another hour and a half's worth of work, and I'm not going to get out there and shoot that thing, But when I do go out, that's where it's for me. It's that pardon the pun, but focus on what you're doing in that moment, what's going on in front of you, going through the workflow process and, making sure, have I got the settings, have I got the focus on the right portion of the image, yada, yada, just making sure all of that stuff and everything else goes out the window. There's literally nothing else to think about. And, for me, that's really where that's my happy place, knee deep in water, whether it's a waterfall or salt water,
nice,
with the tripod in front of me with a nice sunset or a nice scene of some sort, and I can't think of any better way of spending the time.
Indeed, and I think that's what keeps us going. But let's not fool ourselves also. How many times have we gone out expecting this moment of zen, this bliss, and the camera settings are wrong, you forgot your batteries, your SD card, the camera's blurry because you forgot to turn off image stabilization, and everything just seems to be falling apart. We have those moments too, For me, they're fleeting, they're not as frequent as the good moments, but we also have our bad moments. As a lightning photographer, the worst part of shooting the storm is getting set up in any other storm chaser in the Southwest or in the United States. At least a lot of my friends will tell you the same thing. I'm sure this is a global thing, but you see this most beautiful storm. You've finally driven to a place where you can set up a beautiful composition. Meanwhile, these bolts are just raining down gorgeous, epic scenes right before you. You take your time. You're just like you said, you're focused. You capture, you set your camera up. You finally have all your settings. And just as you start to shutter, the lightning has dropped the storm has dropped its last bolt.
Yeah.
It's such a frustrating feeling. And it happens almost every time, it seems. So you have to be patient and persevere through it all. So, and that can also be rewarding in itself too, right? You have multiple failures as a photographer. And if you just keep driving forward, man, that next success is just I don't know if I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've been many times. I've been out by myself, jumping up and down because I just captured something so exciting, and nobody else is there to witness it,
Oh
or
yeah,
else they would probably lock you up.
absolutely. No, there's many times I've been standing in a place and literally there's, you know, no other humans around. There was a shoot I did down on our Sapphire Coast, which is about a 4 or 5 hour drive away from Sydney, and it's kind of, if you think of the Pacific Northwest in the US, it's kind of that epic scenery. Pardon me. And yeah, I was just out there in that pristine wilderness, no other people around, and the sky's starting to go off, and the water's flowing just nicely, the tide's worked out, and you're snapping away, and I'm just the happiest man in the world, and I'm
But
the
you're not a
only
man
one
at the
watching it
moment.
and seeing it and experiencing it.
You're a little child. You're this
That's
little
it.
boy
Yeah.
again, right? Totally understand that feeling. I love
Yeah,
it.
just
It's
fist
what drives
pumping.
me.
Yes.
So sentimental. I guarantee you right now, you're thinking of one of those moments right now as well, where you're just going,
Absolutely.
oh, this is the best. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I agree with you. I mean, the failures are also what makes the successes even more sweet. I mean, I remember going out, and I'm about an hour's drive away from the nearest beach. I went out to do a sunrise shoot at a beach, and I got out there, got the gear out of the car, walked down to where I wanted to do, scouted a few comps, and kind of worked out what I wanted to do, and went to put the camera onto the tripod and realized I'd left the shoe for the tripod
Right.
on a different body back at home.
I've done that before. So the way that I stopped that from happening is that I bought 1,000 of those things,
Yep.
and I have them everywhere. I have them in the console of my car.
Yeah.
I have them in my tripod case, with the little zipper on the side. I have them everywhere. I have a couple of SD cards, just that I bought the cheap ones just in case I forget those, and they're in a little pack. They're probably melted because in the Arizona desert, anything you leave in your car in the middle of the summer. I mean, I know Australia gets hot as well, but it gets around 115 in the car, or on a normal day, outside the car. So I can imagine how hot it gets. Who knows? I'd probably be afraid to put those SD cards in the camera. But in a pinch, you're not going to care. You're just going to use whatever you can.
That's it. You use what you got. Yeah.
Because you're kicking yourself for leaving them at home, or leaving a certain lens at home. I'm not going to need that lens. Who's going to shoot a landscape at 135, and then for some reason there is something that fits the composition perfectly at 135, and you're shooting at 12 millimeters, and you're like, what can I do?
That's it. So tell us a bit about where you live and how that sort of has influenced what you shoot.
Definitely. I'm a creature of the desert. I like to tell people I'm a desert bunny, and I will probably die in the desert, and I'm going to be okay with that as well. I was born in Western Texas, so if you've ever been to the States,
yep,
it's just wide open. There's very few hills. There's a lot of mountains.
Yeah, big
but
sky
even
country,
though,
as they call it.
Yeah, if you're envisioning, some of the cowboy movies where you just see the great vast expanses, that's Western Texas for you as well. So I grew up in the desert, but that was the Chihuahuan Desert, and it's a different ecosystem, different animals, but the similarity of just being a very arid area, and great people, the culture of the border communities between the United States and Mexico. There's a lot of Hispanic heritage, as well as Western cowboy style heritage. West Texas is so known for, you can go and go into Tony Lama boots in El Paso and get these world-class boots because of the boot factories there. And the rodeos are awesome. So I still have a little bit of Texas in me. And moving to Arizona over 20 years ago, I came into the Sonoran Desert, and I discovered that it's a different desert, but there's so many similarities, and yet it has a very unique beauty in its own. If
Yeah.
you've ever seen a saguaro cactus, uh, it's when you're actually in front of one and you see this giant, the typical, it looks like a giant man
It's the
with
cartoon cactus that everyone.
absolutely, it's the Wile E. Coyote cactus in the
Yeah,
background. Yeah,
if you're going to draw a cactus, it's the cactus you draw. Yeah.
exactly. And when you see these things and you're standing next to them, and these things are 20, 30, 40 feet tall. And I don't know, maybe they're not 40. I don't know. They seem 40 feet to me. They're just giants. And I like to call them giants because uh, I'm going to tell you a secret. If you ever come out here and you want to see these things, come out here and shoot these things in the night. There is such an amazing feeling when the stars are overhead and you hear the coyotes in the desert. It really is as stereotypical as you can imagine. But as a photographer, can you imagine the low light, the dark skies? Almost like the Home on the Range song, where the deer and the antelope play. Uh, it really is such an amazing. I know that's more of a Texas song, but listening or being able to be in the Arizona desert, in the Sonoran Desert at night with just the coyotes and the owls, and being in that element, that's another element that I simply have a passion for. And I'll tell you what, the Milky Way and the night skies out here in Arizona are almost as dark as whatever the class levels are. I'm not very good with Bortle 1 through Bortle 5, but you understand what I'm saying. The night skies are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And to be able to frame a saguaro cactus with the Milky Way rising above it, oh, talk about what a shot. And it doesn't require me having to chase a storm or risk my life and limb, other than the rattlesnakes, brown recluses, black widows, and all of the other creatures that are walking below me. So it's a blast.
Nice. So when you're out and about, I guess what are the things you're looking for? Because I mean, I'm mostly a seascaper. As I say, standing knee deep in ocean water. And getting out in the desert's very different. I was talking to Adam Edwards. He's based in a place called Broken Hill, which is, you think of the outback. Well, it's basically the typical outback sort of scene that you would see from Australia, and he does a lot of that sort of thing. And I've been out in those sorts of conditions, but it's just kind of very unfamiliar for me to sort of be in that. What is it that you look for when you're out, other than the classic cactus?
The classic cactus or the typical monsoon storm, right? So for me, as what I've learned as I've grown as a photographer, and as my passion has grown, is it's not necessarily a particular spot, but it's or a particular idea that you have in mind, but it's, for me now, it is 100% the quality of light in the element. So I could go to the coast, and any day, if it's just an overcast, and if it's, I call it the 18% gray day, right? Where the camera's like, it's pretty 18% gray. You could have a card, and the clouds are just, there is no color in the sky. There's no shade, or there's no really nice shadows cast. It's just everything is 18% gray, and it's boring. It's flat. A boring scene. Exactly. But I've discovered that my own, I'm developing an eye for just looking for something where the quality of light is enhanced, whether it's in a saguaro scene, a desert scape at sunset. And it doesn't always have to be at sunset. I'm pushing myself to want to capture incredible scenes in the middle of the day. But that lends itself to another problem, is dying of skin cancer by being in the Arizona desert in the middle of the day, or heat stroke, of course. But I want to get out there, but I want to capture something that's, when the light changes, a scene or a surrounding. And so it doesn't really matter where I am. There have been many times where I don't have my camera and I see something, I see a scene, I see reflections on buildings creating the downtown area where the entire cityscape just becomes alive for maybe 30 minutes. And then it drops off and it looks just like another boring cityscape again.
Yeah,
And
right.
those are the things that my eyes slowly training on, are not necessarily the place, but the quality of light that's in that place.
Absolutely.
And I'm pushing myself so hard to want to be able to, don't you just want to take this, like this box and pick that light up and put it in this box and bring it back to your friends and say, look what I captured, look at this rare species that I've captured, and present it to the world and share that. That's what my heart is. And that's why I have a passion for the big bright lightning and these big beautiful storms in the Southwest, because we do have these unique high based storms, right? Like on the Great Plains, they have these giant supercells, but the cloud bases are so low to the ground, of course, which enhance the probabilities of tornadoes and a lot of other severe weather. But in Arizona, we don't have these bases so low usually. And so more often than not, these cloud bases are so high. So that lends itself to essentially pulling the dress back from the lightning and exposing that lightning to just show a huge clear channel come out of the sky and land. And that's what's really dazzling about it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you mentioned it's the monsoon season, and it lasts 2 months. What are you doing outside those 2 months?
Editing, editing, and editing. Realistically, I'm sitting on a few terabytes of time lapses that I have to go through.
Wow.
And they're just going to sit there until I get to them. So I'm actually trying to preparing to drop a collection as well. And I've been just taking my time, despite as we've discussed, the fear of missing out. I want to share this with the world, and I want people to see that excitement. I want people to see that light that I captured in a box or in a square, so to speak. You know what I mean? In a two-dimensional square. And I want to share that with the world, and I want people to be able to own that as well in a digital space in this new frontier. So I know a lot of people aren't very familiar with that space, but that's something that I want to expand into as well. And it's just taking time to edit everything and be proud of your edit, right? That's probably my biggest weakness, is I still don't know I still haven't mastered or even have what I consider a rudimentary education level of Photoshop. And so being able to adjust noise and use luminosity maskings and all of these things, I'm just scratching my head thinking I'll never learn this completely. So in addition to that, I have to take time to educate myself so I can get better, not only capture better shots, but edit them better so that it looks more pleasant, So that's what I'm doing the rest of the year. And of course, I'm doing astrophotography, trying to shoot that, going back into the desert scapes and still enjoying the beautiful weather that we have here in Arizona. And we actually have a lot of mountains as well and forests. So within a 1 to 4 hour drive, you can be actually up at about 9,000, 10,000 feet.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's really surprising. The entirety of Arizona isn't your typical Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, scene. That's pretty much just the southern half of it.
That's all most people get. When somebody says Arizona, I think of that red sandstone.
Exactly.
the mesas and sort of Monument Valley sort of style.
Right. But Arizona has some of the most beautiful forests and lakes and all of that. So it's just really a beautiful place to visit. And of course, we have the Grand Canyon, which I just want to spend. My next mission is to spend a week at the Grand Canyon, capturing day to night, night to day time lapses.
Oh, fantastic.
I have to plan that, though.
Well, talking about planning, how much planning do you put into, say, a storm shoot versus an Astro shoot? And what are the sort of things that you're looking at when you're planning, particularly for storm chasing? Obviously, weather reports and weather apps are going to be number one, but what's your process for saying, okay, I've got to get out and do it, and this is where I got to be?
Yeah, so like you said, of course, the weather forecasting, learning to know where the best moisture is going to be, because without that moisture content, without that surge of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of California that pushes north into the desert area, you can literally we all laugh in Arizona because your neighbor can literally get 2 inches of rain and you're sitting here looking at the cloud, or looking at the clear sky and
like somebody with a watering can over the top of their place, but not your
That is
place.
so true here in Arizona. Even as you're driving, you're going, oh, I think it's going to be, oh, okay, there's the rain. And all of a sudden you have to slow down. And then 5 minutes later, it's clear and you're driving on dry road again. So wow. Learning to figure out where that's going to happen is such a delicate science. And I've actually heard many storm chasers off from the Great Plains that chase tornadoes. They come here and they're going, what the hell is going on here? I don't, I'm having a difficult time finding the storm or getting to the storm, because once you get to the storm in Arizona, most of our storms here in Arizona are of the pulse type variety, right? They pop up and within 30 minutes, they're dead. And at any given time, and at any given time, if you're at near one mountain range waiting for the storms to initiate over a mountain range, and then of course you're looking off 60 miles in the distance and see the most gorgeous storm just erupt, creating the just spectacular scenes. And then if you decide to go over there, of course, by the time you get there, it's already dead, and the place that you just left is now erupting. So it's a game of whack-a-mole with the Arizona monsoon. And after a while, you can learn to forecast better. But more importantly is, what are you going to do once the magic happens, right? I mean, once you're in the scene, now your adrenaline's kicking in and your breathing starts to fluctuate and quicken, and you have to really focus. My spouse has always been telling me to stop doing what I do, which is such a Lori thing to do, is I get excited and I start talking and the storm is dropping.
Hyperventilating.
I need to get my camera. Oh crap, there's no battery in it because they're on a charger. I need to grab these other batteries and now the SD card. But did I format I have 4 time lapses on this. I didn't format this SD card. And if start now, you know what I'm saying? And it snowballs from there. And that's like we were just talking about focus. I have to really just dial it back and take a breath and tell myself, okay, the storm's there. Get out, get your tripod, take your time, set your shot, and don't touch your damn camera. That's number 1 rule for me, because every time I touch it, I shake the camera. Don't peek. If you capture a shot, don't turn off your camera to chimp the shot, right? We all want to see the victory shot, but you're going to miss the next best shot by doing that.
Particularly when there's a storm and lightning, because that one bolt that you caught, then you think, oh, that's fantastic, and then as you said, you chimp the chimp the back screen, and another bolt right where you want it actually happens.
That's exactly what happens. So many times, so much frustration. So so the whole process for me is, once I'm at the storm, once the magic is happening, take your time, find a good composition, which is difficult because the storm is in a certain place, and now within seconds you literally have to find a good composition depending on where you're at. There could be telephone lines, advertising billboards, whatever it is, and you want to get away from all of that. And at the same time, you're actually trying to think ahead, which is the biggest thing that I've really tried to work on, is plan ahead for the next stop. Now that once this storm is done, what am I going to do in the next 15 minutes? And you're starting to plan your exit strategy as well. Sometimes it's because you're in a very remote area and the flash floods are going to block you off. So you need to stop shooting so you can get out of there. Or you're going to be stuck waiting for these flash floods before you can actually get back to civilization. There's a lot that goes on.
So what about your Astro shoots? Are you using things like photo pills and so forth to work out where the Milky Way is going to rise and all that sort of thing? Are you doing much
I
planning for
do.
that, or are you more an opportunistic shooter?
A little of both. Sometimes I just want to get out there and just see what I can capture. I really love, as a storm chaser, that you're really a run and gunner type of photographer. You just have to make sure your gear's ready, your car is gassed up, your tires are good,
Yeah,
your car is going to
leave the
start.
settings as they were the last storm shoot. Yeah,
Yeah, and then get in the game. Once you're in the game, it's fight time. Your gloves are on. You're fighting the storm. But with astrophotography, you can definitely be much more uh, methodical in your shots. So I've used photo pills. I'm not an expert at that stuff, and it seems like every time I try to get that beautiful compressed, the compression of the moon
yeah, yeah.
rising over a horizon of saguaros, of tiny little saguaros. Of course, I'm dialed in, and then I look, and for some reason my phone just didn't zero in on where it was rising, and I was off by 5 degrees.
Oh,
And
no.
now I just have the sliver of the moon on the right, and I'm done. Right, once that moon is off the horizon,
That's
you're
it. Yeah,
done. So
yeah. It's surprising how quick it moves. Eh?
it is, exactly. Or your settings aren't dialed in, so you're shooting at f7, and the moon pops up, and all you get is this big white
Oh,
chunk of light
yeah.
beaming into your camera. So yeah, lots of failures, but it's a lot. You can still be much more methodical, especially with the Milky Way. I use an app on the iOS called Sky Guide. Have you ever used
Okay.
that? I absolutely love that. And you can fast forward to see how it's going to look over time. I've used that ever since I started shooting Astro, but I'm by no means an Astro expert. But the cameras that I use sure do help a nugget like me get better at capturing Astro, because I do have the Sony A7S III, and that is such a phenomenally beautiful low light camera. Of
Mm.
course, it's primarily a video centric camera with the 12 megapixels, but low light is just astounding at 50. What is it? 51,200 is
Yeah.
still incredibly clean. And I also use the Sony A1 as well, and
Yeah,
that's really
even 12
good.
megapixels though is certainly good enough for you know you could probably blow that up to maybe an A2 sort of size. Maybe not
Right.
A1. A1 you could probably get away with if you were careful, but if you're printing at all, um, you
That's
know
exactly it.
the thing is most people experience this online, so you know the size doesn't matter. The megapixels really doesn't matter that much.
It really doesn't. I've captured many lightning photos that I've posted um, on online using the A7S III, and they're just as stunning. And I've never heard someone say, I think it needed more megapixels, Lori. Can you use a better camera?
That's it. Yeah.
Nobody knows. And so, I'm happy with it. And as well, and I do have the Sony A1, which is just a phenomenal camera through and through. That's my investment into myself, was getting that, and I have to somehow earn it back.
Mm.
It The gear that we buy, it shouldn't just be for fun unless you have money to burn. And I
That's
don't know
it.
many people that can do that.
No, it's an expensive addiction, as you called it earlier. And I was talking to somebody about that on the podcast a few episodes ago. Is that you do you can get sucked into that, the latest and greatest gizmo or gadget or whatever, whether it's a
What do they call it?
star
Gas?
tracker or whatever.
What is a gear acquisition syndrome? Gas?
Yeah, gas. Yeah, you can get sucked into that very easily, and some of it's a bit of FOMO as well.
Oh
But
yeah,
then there are also the things that you go, okay, I've absolutely got to have that because this is a gap that I've seen, and something that I really need to look at, to take my photography to the next level. If I up the body or get a better piece of glass, or get some expensive filters or whatever, they
absolutely. It should be focused on the tools you need versus the
exactly.
the
Yeah,
the excitement over a product.
that's it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It I always liken it to that tool and analogy. It doesn't matter how big your hammer is if your nail is only a quarter of an inch long.
Very true.
I don't need a hammer for that.
I've actually I've had friends that told me, well, I have a Canon 60D and it doesn't meet my needs, and then I tell them, do you have a nifty 50? Because I will show you some secrets. Get some good glass, put it on an older body, and watch the magic happen.
Exactly.
Of course, the low light capability might not be there, but if you're shooting daytime and you're just wanting to be an entry level photographer and not spend $15,000 on gear, pick up an old Canon XT or an older T2i or whatever those are called, or the Nikon bodies, and just invest a few $100 into some relatively inexpensive primes, and your passion for photography will just skyrocket without breaking the bank.
And that's particularly if you're not taking that gear to its extremes. If you're shooting within its range, even a kit lens, if you're shooting around that f7 to f11 sort of range, and your sensor doesn't have to be the biggest and best and the greatest. It can still be on an old 60D or even a 500D or a 600D or something like that. And you can still take great photos because you've actually thought about the quality of the light, because of the composition and the elements that you've brought together in that image, and the way that you've post-processed it. You don't need really, really expensive gear to come out with fantastic photography.
That's so true. And what I've learned most in all of this is the best tool is the one that you have in your hands at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, my shattered screen iPhone is still capturing amazing images now, because sometimes that's all I have. And of course, I'm regretting not having my better gear with me.
Sure.
But at the same time, I have an iPhone with me, and I still have an opportunity to capture something, to capture the moment. So freaking use it. Don't be afraid. And don't let anybody tell you, oh, you just have a stupid iPhone, or you have this 5-year-old cruddy, crop sensor with a kit lens. You can't take good photos of that. Don't listen to any of that, because I promise you, give me an old crop sensor, 5-10-year-old camera, and I promise you, if you want me to capture something great, I will push myself to do so. So yeah.
Yeah, totally with you on that. Do you run any workshops at all, or are you sort of just going out and doing it for your own enjoyment?
Yeah, so I'm getting into that. The last couple of years, I've had a couple of small workshops where I end up taking a few people who want to see the same things that I do and want to learn my technique. And so we'll just go out for 2 or 3 days on a weekend or something, and we'll just go find some fun to capture, whether there's storms, whether there's a beautiful sunset. My last workshop, we were actually trying to shoot sprites in approximately 100 miles away in Mexico, but the cloud cover just didn't lend itself to it. And you have to have really unique conditions to capture a transient luminous event like a sprite. And of course I did capture blue jets this year, and I was just so excited to capture that because they're extremely rare. But I want to be able to take people with me to do that. And I have a lot more knowledge now on how to capture those. So even in future workshops, as those grow and as I incorporate more workshops into my career, I want to be able to take people to capture something that's not only extraordinary, but now very rare and unique too. It's an exciting path that I'm currently charting, a course that I'm charting for the future of what I'm going to do.
For those that don't know, what are sprites or blue jets?
Yeah, so it's so fun to capture lightning that you see in most of my images, but a lot of people don't know that there is something. There is a lightning discharge in quite often in larger thunderstorm complexes called sprites. There's several of them called lumped into what's called a TLE, or a transient luminous event. And if you Google that, you're going to go down this really amazing rabbit hole of of something that's going to blow your mind. And there's actually this electrical phenomena that happens above the storm, right? And sprites actually often look like jellyfish or angels, red angels or jellyfish that happen above the storm in the ionosphere. And blue jets actually are ejected into the stratosphere, and they're bluish and purple. And if you're ever able to see these, either capturing them on camera or seeing these in person, it will change your life. There's something so unique to seeing these things shoot out above the storm from a complex that's 100 to 150 miles away. You're sitting there in clear skies getting engulfed by mosquitoes. There's no storms above you, but yet you can capture this unique event with the right camera, with the right settings, and you're shooting really wide and in very dark conditions. So you do need in this instance, you need a camera that lends itself to low light capabilities. You're shooting at ISO 6400 at least, sometimes 32, but 3200.
Yeah,
not ISO 32.
This is where spending a bit more money on your gear actually helps.
Yeah, exactly. But being able to capture these things, I just recommend people look up Paul Smith, because Paul is the absolute sprite king. He seems to capture every sprite in the United States that does not everything north of Mexico. I tend to point my cameras into Mexico or near the U.S. border, just because of where I live. And we do get those complexes over here, but they're nothing as dazzling as the sprites that occur over Oklahoma and Kansas.
Yeah,
just phenomenal work.
It sounds really cool, and I think if people want to get to see that sort of thing, I think it'd be great if they could get out into some workshops and experience that. That'd be fantastic.
No doubt. And there's never a guarantee. You have to, again, whether you're just going out to capture something from 5 miles from your home or not, you're not going to capture anything unless you get off your butt and get out there and do it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's the key. You've really got to get out there. So what's the most memorable experience you've had when out shooting?
I've had many. I had a lightning bolt that I've posted and I'm hoping that people can actually see it if they go back and look up at some of my work. But I posted that today, even, of a lightning bolt that struck so close. I was still miles away. I think I was at least about 7 to 8 miles away from a storm that was a severe warning storm that was dropping a lot of rain east of Nogales, Arizona. And I was pretty far away, but the storm was slowly moving towards me. And if you've ever heard of a bolt from the blue, or a clear air bolt, these are lightning bolts that just shoot way far away from a parent storm and will land seemingly in the middle of nowhere. Like you'll just be sitting there with the sun, you'll be playing a game and this lightning strike will happen. And this bolt from the blue came out of the top of the storm and landed approximately 50 to 75 yards away. And I had my cameras trained in that direction, and both cameras captured that bolt, that strike. And you can see where the orange fireball, where it strikes the ground, and the thunder crash was instantaneous. And I thought I was dead. I thought, wow. And there, of course, we're reacting as soon as you see the lightning and hear the thunder, we're reacting to it. Action is too late. That happened. React to it. You're struck by, and you need medical attention. You're never going to be able to react to it other than just a natural reaction. So this was so close. And the cool thing about it was I was also recording a video for my followers, talking about these positive bolts that reach out and land so far away from the storm, when one reached out and nearly touched me as well. And so I also have a video of that as well. And that was a very memorable moment. And it gave me even more respect to respect the storm and keep your distance, because those things will reach out and touch someone if you're not careful.
That's phenomenal. So when you're, I guess, looking for advice or inspiration from another photographer, who's your go-to person, and what are you normally asking them for?
I have so many people. I can't think of one person in particular, especially now that I've just come into a space where there are hundreds of amazing photographers of every variety. There are street photographers right now who I want to have private discussions. I want to just pick their brains, not in a public forum, and just say, can we have a Zoom talk? Because I want to pick your brain on what you're doing and how you capture these elements. I heard somebody the other day talking about he only shoots in rain in the cityscape. And I thought, wow, no wonder his images look like some scene out of Blade Runner. Everything is shiny and transparent. But he works his butt off for them, and I'm just exceptionally enamored, drawn into his images. And so on top of, okay, well, you're going to shoot in the rain in a cityscape in a downtown area. Well, how do you keep your gear dry, for Pete's sake?
Yeah.
And there's a lot to pick his brain on. And then of course people who go out and shoot waterfalls. And as soon as you said you like to stand in the ocean, I'm thinking, are you crazy? What about the salt? It's going to destroy your gear and your camera. And what happens if you were to knock it over into the ocean? You're done. And so I want to pick your brain now on how you are able to get so close to the ocean and capture those, that and smooth out the ocean so it doesn't look jagged and just unpleasing. So I'm already wanting to pick your brain as soon as you said that.
happy to spend some time with you outside the podcast to talk about that, because I mean the simple fact is waterproof tripod, number one, so it's fiber. And so, again, a piece of gear worth spending a bit more money on. I used to have an old aluminium one, and eventually it just seized up from the rust.
Wow.
But so that's number one. It has to be solid enough that it's not going to get knocked around, and not, I guess, not walking away from your gear as well when it's set up where you're likely to get knocked over by a wave, and being pretty quick and being able to read the waves and lift. Many a time I've lifted the tripod over my head to keep the camera out of the water while I've got engulfed by
Save the gear while you take the brunt of it.
I'm saturated, the gear's fine. But I have also killed a camera or two through splashing. But funnily enough, it's the more innocuous. I think it's probably just the over the period, over a period build up of salt inside the body, but the
cost of doing business, right?
Yeah, that's it. But the last time I killed a camera, it was such an innocuous little splash that hit it. I was thinking, oh well, and then it just started going wrong. And the thing was, it wouldn't turn off unless you took the battery out. You put the battery in, and it was always on. So it was kind of like, okay, that's weird. So
it fused the contact to be open.
Exactly, constantly. Yeah. So off to the shop to get somebody to clean it out and fix it. And $600.
Can you imagine if you and I were to get together right now and develop a camera that was resistant to have all the internal components completely waterproof, where you can just jump in the water and start shooting? Man, what kind of millions we could make about this? This is a venture we need to discuss offline sometime.
Definitely. I mean, there are those sorts of, you can buy housings and all those sorts of things for your gear, but again, they're more expensive bits of kit. But I did try and use a rain cover for a while, and when it is raining heavily or I'm at a waterfall shoot, then I'll probably stick that on. But I just find it really cumbersome, and it just gets in the way when you're trying to do those ocean shoots. So
the same thing applies for me as well with the rain cover. I try to use them, but they just get in the way as well. And I've lost a few camera bodies, to the outflow of rain as the storm ejects and lands on the ground. All the water pushes that air forward. And if you're not careful, if you're not at your tripod, the camera, the outflow boundary will just, the gust front will just knock your cameras over. And that's been a very costly, that's probably the most costly mistake I've ever made, is continuing to forget that I cannot just leave my camera there and expect it to be okay without being close to it. Because I will position several cameras, or two or three cameras, one's composed in front of this yucca plant and this other one's in front of this flower.
Yep.
And they're 10 to 50 meters away from each other. And that's a bad thing to do if you're by yourself.
Yeah. No, well, I for what I do, I literally can't do that. I did try a few shoots with two bodies on two separate tripods and whatever, but I just found it too hard to manage. And, unless you're somewhere where you're secure, dry, and it's, you're not going to, not going to get knocked over by wind or rain. It's, it's a bit of a challenge doing multi-camera, doing what I do anyway. Yeah. So have you ever hit a creative wall, and how did you handle that?
That's such a great question. And I think everyone as a photographer needs to have a little introspection on that. I've met so many photographers that struggle with self-worth. Mm-hmm. And I think our lack of self-worth tends to make that wall vastly larger than it should be, just mm-hmm. because we struggle with that. 2 or 3 failures can end up completely demoralizing you, and you just want to throw your camera away. You want to put the gear away.
Why am I doing
not touch it? Yeah. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I think that's such an important topic that I just can't get enough of trying to put it out there when I'm talking to my own friends and photographer friends, is that we need to focus on our own wellness. And if getting out there and shooting and getting out there and failing is going to cause us to just feel like we're terrible people and that we suck at what we're doing, mm-hmm. then we do need to take a step back and realize that, like we were talking about earlier, for me, those failures have ended up making my successes even that much sweeter.
Yep.
So, but it has happened so many times where I feel like I hit a wall because I'm just not improving, or my skills in post-processing just aren't cutting it compared to other people. And I think that's the biggest issue. My creative wall will happen because I start comparing my work with others.
Yeah.
And my goodness, there are so many great artists out there and photographers, and it's easy to compare ourselves to others. And while that can be a drive, it can also completely obliterate our own sense of self-worth. And I think it's important to just refocus. For me, when those days where I just grab the dogs and I have no expectation of capturing anything, I think those are my recharge days. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so if I don't capture anything on that day, that's fine. For me, that's me allowing myself to just have space to not overdo it, not push myself to the extreme where if I fail, I'm going to feel like I'm done, completely done, and walk away from it. Because that very thing that you became passionate about, in photography, again, I go back to taking photos with a crappy old, I say crappy, of course, in quotes, but an old camera, taking thousands of photos of my kids starts to come back.
Yep.
And it renews that sense of why I'm doing what I do.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There is no fame that is going to reward you as much as you going out there and just feeling whole as a person and knowing that you can forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah. I think, everyone has that little voice in the back of their head telling them what a bad person they are, or how they're no good, or whatever. Everyone's their worst, their own worst critic.
Very much so.
I think, a big part of that comes from comparing yourself to others, and particularly in Western society, it's been kind of the way that you're brought up, through testing and all the rest of these sorts of things. It's a competition,
Right, right.
who's the best runner, who's the best speller, who's, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. What is the golden rule of business? Do unto others before they do unto you,
That's
right?
it. Yeah, that's exactly
That's
it. And
terrible.
and I think that competitive spirit, helps spur people on, which it does have positives.
Hmm.
But it certainly can have negative, aspects to it too. And I think the important thing to remember is that everyone is where they are in their creative or or their learning journey, and
Absolutely.
not everyone is at the same place, and some people move along that curve at a different rate to others. Some people get that ability quicker, or they learn that skill. The thing is, what we're talking about largely is a set of skills that are learned. Nobody came out of the womb ready-made as a master photographer.
Grant, do you ever go back and look at your first year photos and think,
Oh yeah, all
what
the
were
time.
you thinking?
I flick through my analog photo albums and look at the film stuff that I was doing, and
Atrocious, right? I mean, I'm not saying that about you, but you say that about your
yeah,
own images the
you
first
look
year
at it and
going.
go, this is just trash. Why am I even keeping it? Not the ones
But
of the
then if
kids,
you
of course, but even
exactly.
in, pardon me, even an out of focus shot of my child is still more precious to me than
Absolutely.
the best
You don't
landscape
delete those.
photo. No,
Exactly.
absolutely not. Yeah. But the thing is that everyone is where they are, and I think comparing yourself to where other people are on that curve is just you're on a hiding to nothing. There's just
Mm,
there's no real good that can come of it. Now, what you can do, I guess, the good that could come out of it is you say, I want to get as good as that, and
right,
you
right.
might not ever do it, in your lifetime. Some people either don't have the raw talent that is needed, or they just don't have the drive to learn the skills that they need to be able to do it. But at least if you're going to strive, look at that positive and look at that as something that you want to achieve. Then you know you as I say, you don't get this when you come out of the womb, you don't get this through sitting on your backside not taking photos. You don't get skilled by not learning how to process properly. It's only through your own education, you taking that by the neck and dragging your photography capability along with you to
Right.
where you want it to be, and if you're happy
You
with
know,
what you're doing. I mean, I'm never happy with what I'm still looking at things
right.
and going, yeah,
Oh
well, that's
yeah.
not quite right. I could sharpen that just a little bit more or
And
whatever.
that's what's so important to excuse me, is never rest on your laurels. That
No.
is something I've learned from watching videos of people that I consider just who have gone from ordinary to extraordinary, whatever the story is. Anybody that's gone from ordinary to extraordinary, they all have a common theme, and it always said it's always never rest on your laurels. It's how can I do better tomorrow? How can I push myself to another boundary? I there are so many people. There are comedians actually. I guess comedy is a perfected craft, very similar to photography. And
Absolutely, yeah.
listen, that's something. If by the way, if the listeners would actually do that, if they're willing to do that, go look at some of those comedic greats. If they're giving speeches, or if there's online content where they're talking about how they became an expert in their craft. And there's always that same theme. That are so many parallels to what we do. Is they want to give up. They're putting themselves out there, and they have to improve. And that sense of self-worth is driving them. Also, you see the pressures that they're facing being cast right into in front of a live audience, and they can't fail.
Yep.
And but the running theme between all of us creatives is that they never rested on their laurels.
No, that's it.
And that's something that I don't want to rest on. I know I don't feel like I could rest on my laurels, because I think I need a few more crowns and jewels to rest upon. but I want that one more. I want to be better next year. And on top of that, I want to finally overcome some of those things that were inhibiting me, like the lack of self-worth. It's taken me 6 years as a photographer, and I'm not going to give you my age, but nearly half a decade of learning and grieving and healing to finally realize that I can do this and that I'm okay and what I'm doing is okay. And I don't need to compare myself to anyone. And I don't even need to be a part of that toxicity that's out there, that's just roaming around, waiting to grip your own heart, to just be free and to take those dogs that are barking in the background and just get out there and just go have some fun and recharge if necessary.
Absolutely. If you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
If I weren't a photographer, what would I be?
Yeah.
I would be, I see that you have a couple of airplanes behind you there. I always wanted to be an airplane pilot.
Cool.
And I always wanted to fly. Is that a 747 on the thing? I can't really tell.
I think it was, I don't know, to be honest. I think it's
might be an Airbus
and an Airbus A380.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. So I always had a fascination with the sky. Of course, I love the sky so much. I wanted to fly them as well. So I guess that was a natural course in my brain, is that I have a passion for capturing the colors in the sky. But if I weren't a photographer, I probably would be a pilot. If I had pursued what I wanted to when I was a young kid, I loved airplanes. I had these encyclopedias. Don't tell anyone, but I stole a giant encyclopedia of airplanes, of aviation, from a library, and I kept that thing.
Right,
and it had,
you and me.
Okay. Oops. Sorry, public library. I'll pay for it now, I think. But I kept the book. I never returned it because I loved it so much, and it had the wingspan. The little diagrams, in addition to the cool looking photos of it, talking about TWA and Pan Am and all of these gorgeous airliners. The 747 is my favorite. I know this is a tangent, but I just think the 747 is the most beautiful aircraft ever made. And watching those old 70s movies called Airport 77, Airport 79, the Concorde, those were just fantastic. I just loved watching them, just to watch those jumbo jets fly around the mountains.
Yeah. I remember as a child seeing one of those flying into Sydney for the first time, and just having my mind blown about how something that big could stay in the
Absolutely.
air. And now you got the A380, which is almost twice the size.
Yeah. And how agile they are. You've seen, you can see trained pilots. They can nearly flip these things in the air.
Absolutely.
It's just astonishing how far we've come in technology.
So back to photography. Are there any photographers out there that you think should be on the podcast? Who should I talk to next?
Oh my goodness. Have you?
I know it's a big list. I have a huge list already. So.
Right. Have you seen street photographers like Cody Conk and JT and those guys? I hang out in their rooms a lot.
I've been. I haven't reached out to them yet, but I've got them on my list. Cody Conk in particular.
Cody's a really great photographer, but JT, for some reason, there's something about JT's images. He's probably on a space right now. He hosts those spaces all the time. But take a look at his photos. He's one of them that I can get lost in. Isn't that a great feeling when you can take somebody's photo and you haven't left that one particular image? We all just kind of, there's so many, just next. That's nice. But JT's, I will stop and I'll see someone riding a bike, and then I zoom in and I see an old lady walking across the street. And then I see something else, a man cooking, selling hot dogs or something. And I'm transformed. I'm transported into this image, and now I'm there. And I feel like I'm looking all around. It's amazing. I feel like it's better than a movie for some reason, into this one single piece of imagery. That's what JT's work does for me. But anyways. Yeah, I love street photography now, and I hope it rains in Tucson so I can actually grab my camera and stay there and try to capture that same kind of element, because it's that light, it's that quality of light that I want to
Sure,
capture.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, the reflective surfaces and whatever that come when it rains. It's yeah, and I think it's a real skill. There's some fantastic ones here in Australia, down in Melbourne. There's a couple of guys down there that are doing just some absolutely outstanding work. How they get it so crisp, how they get the reflections just right, and all that sort of thing. Blows my mind. But definitely put JP
Absolutely.
Cody on the list then.
There's also some a new, not new, it's certainly not new, but something that's new to me are these rising Black female photographers that
Yep.
are that have a mission to regain the narrative that Black women are beautiful, and that that entire, some of these street photos that I've seen. Brittany, and I forget her last name, is one person that I have a sense she's going somewhere, and
Yep.
she's powerful, and I just want to sit down and shut up and listen to her story. And I want her to tell the story of how these group of people, all these people that are having fun jumping rope, or they're on the street, but there's just so much life in these images, and I'm just drawn into it, and I want to hear the story, and it compels me to take a seat and be, sit back and let somebody else rise to the front who is powerful, strong, and beautiful. And that really, really pushes me to a new horizon, because I've grown up in such a narrow, limited paradigm
Yep.
that has been hostile to other people that I don't understand and know. And I need to finally break those boundaries and borders. And Brittany, I think, is someone that already has reached across to say, look at how beautiful and joyful our spirits are. And that just takes me back. I want more of that, and I want to see more of that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Well, she's definitely on the list as well.
Awesome.
All right. I've got one more question, and for the listeners who are regulars, they'll know it is the most important question of the whole podcast. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Oh my goodness! Why would you even suggest that? I'm going to send you a large bill for this now. I need to collect. My goodness, I'm going to have to send you just a $1 million charge for this podcast now, because that is absolutely horrible. Why would you do such a thing?
Yeah, it's a very divisive topic. I'm a neutral, to be honest. If it's there and there's nothing else, I'll have it. But if it's not there,
come on, Grant. There is no neutral. This is war that we're talking about. You're either for us or you're against us, Grant. Come on. No pineapple on pizza, please. Eradicate this balderdash.
Scourge on society.
Scourge, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Laurie. It's been absolutely a pleasure. I've really enjoyed hearing some of your story and some of what you've been up to, and I really like some of your descriptions about how you do what you do, and I'd just like to offer you the opportunity. Where can people find your work?
I'm pretty much easy to find everywhere and anywhere. Twitter is my jam. YouTube also, I do have time lapses, and Instagram I'm still pushing my photos out there as well, and pretty much anywhere and everywhere. If you just look up Laurie Grace AZ on any of those spaces, you'll find me. And the AZ is short for Arizona, of course. So Laurie Grace AZ, and you should find my ugly mug somewhere, and dive right into the world of lightning photography and my musings. And I always enjoy sharing, if it's technical aspects of photography, I'm more than willing to share. And that's what I love about this community is people are so willing to share, all of this knowledge that took you and I to have to dive into books and tutorials and maybe spend lots of money. There's so much that's free out there if you just ask.
And lots of time.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And hope to follow your work and catch up with you again on some Twitter Spaces. I'm sure we'll see each other around the metaverse somewhere.
And I just have one question for you now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
What's under your couch?
Just some dust bunnies at the moment, I think. I hope.
Nice.
I haven't moved this week to vacuum under it.
I love these inside jokes. Nobody else will ever get. It's great.
That's right. No, nobody else is going to know what we're talking about.
That's fantastic.
Renee might.
Renee will absolutely know.
Fair enough.
Well, it's been great, Grant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'm going to be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work and this podcast on grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne and hope to see you out shooting soon.